Hi everyone, my name is Jack, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Jeremy Ogden, a detective with the Hobart, Indiana Police Department, leaned over his desk, staring at a manuscript that had kept him busy for years. The diary bore witness to a tragic story involving 53-year-old Christopher Regan. Christopher Regan was born in Detroit, Michigan. In this city, he lived his early years, and there he received his education. When he reached the age of 20, he decided to join the ranks of those who were willing to defend their country. Christopher found his true calling and devoted himself to the service of his country. With honor and devotion, he stood guard over the peace of the citizens. This choice forever determined his fate. Christopher was sent to a military base located near the cozy town of Marquette. Here, on the military base, not far from Marquette, fate brought Christopher together with Terry, a young teacher from the cozy town of Iron River. Recalling their acquaintance, Terry told the detective how, being young, they saw each other and sympathy arose at first sight. Young people often met on the streets of the city and embarrassed to say hello, and over time began to walk together. Communication became more and more frequent and closer, and eventually grew into friendship. For several years, they remained only close friends because the service in the Army did not leave Christopher the opportunity to build a serious relationship. At some point, Chris decided to leave the military service and move to Traverse City, a city located in the same state, but far from the place where his beloved lived. However, the distance did not become a barrier to their feelings. On the contrary, communication between them became even closer, and in December 2012, Christopher proposed to Terry to start a long-distance romantic relationship. Both were single at that moment, knew each other for many years, and always observed the line of propriety. Terry happily agreed. After a short time, the lovers realized that they had many common interests: a love of nature, a preference for a measured lifestyle, a thirst for tranquility. That's why Iron River became the perfect place for both of them. The couple made the decision to live together. Christopher moved in with Terry, found a job at a factory producing parts for military ships, and soon he had his own subordinates. Life was shaping up in the best possible way. However, after 2 years of living together, problems began in the relationship between Christopher and Terry, and the passion gradually faded. As young people did not try to overcome the difficulties of this difficult period, it became obvious that they would not be able to keep their connection. Eventually, they made the difficult decision to part ways. The parting was peaceful, and the former lovers managed to maintain friendly relations. After breaking up with Terry, Christopher could no longer continue his life in her house, so he decided to rent his own place. As time went on, it dawned on him that he wanted to change where he lived as well. Iron River seemed too small, and Chris began looking for a more dynamic and vibrant city. He responded to job openings in various locations by sending out his resume. In October 2014, fate presented Christopher with the opportunity to start a new chapter in Asheville, North Carolina. Here he found not only a job, but also a cozy place with many picturesque natural attractions. In a new city, Chris was about to start his life anew. On October 14th, Christopher wrote Terry that he had taken the day off and would be free the next day. The reason was a doctor's appointment, after which he suggested they meet up and go for a walk, as they had often done when they still lived together. However, on October 15th, he did not contact his girlfriend. Terry was worried. She tried calling him for several days. Concerned, she contacted mutual friends, but they knew nothing. 10 days later, a worried Terry filed a police report about Christopher's disappearance. The report was accepted, but the police were quick to comfort Terry, assuring her that people sometimes disappear for a while and then return, sometimes even ending up in other places. At the police station, Terry also revealed that Christopher had recently received a job offer in North Carolina. For the police, this was reason not to be too concerned, suggesting that he may have made it to his new residence and decided to start a new life, severing all ties to the past. To avoid making idle speculations, investigators launched a detailed investigation. They managed to identify the company where Christopher had recently started working and contacted one of the employees to find out what he knew about Christopher. However, astonishingly, no information could be obtained. Christopher had not shown up for work in 10 days. The police speculated that he might have been the victim of an accident, given his frequent solitary trips outdoors. Search forces headed into the local woods, trying to check everything on the paths Christopher liked to explore. Specially trained dogs were deployed to reinforce the search, but unfortunately, no trace of the missing man was ever found. Terry then suggested a visit to Christopher's former apartment in order to make sure that no accident had happened to him. Perhaps traces could be found there that would indicate his current whereabouts. Agreeing to Terry's suggestion, the investigators went to the home of the missing Christopher. Upon entering the apartment, the detectives were struck by the chaos inside. Items were strewn across the floor, closets were left open. Their first thought was that Christopher was probably just a sloppy person and had forgotten to clean up. Terry, however, immediately refuted this idea, claiming that her ex-boyfriend was not that sloppy. The detectives began to lean toward the idea that all of this might be connected to the crime. After inspecting Regan's home, it was decided to start searching for him on a larger scale. The police looked carefully through the neighborhood and finally found Regan's car outside the city limits, about 8 miles from Iron River. It was unlikely that he had left his car there intentionally. They had to break one of the doors to get inside the car. There was nothing suspicious in the interior. On the seat were ordinary clothes, such as those often found among locals: hat, coat, gloves. However, one of the policemen carefully noticed on the front passenger seat a small piece of yellow paper with a route written on it. It was decided to follow the route indicated in the note. There was no specific address on the paper, but the route was described in detail. Terry explained that despite living in Iron River, Christopher still hadn't learned the names of streets and roads, so he wrote down directions like turning at a bus stop or driving past a gas station. Terry shared that, judging from the detailed notes, this was the first time Christopher was headed to this location. The group of detectives followed the route indicated on the piece of paper. This route took them to a neighboring town. Stopping in front of the house noted in Christopher's notes, the investigators knocked on the door. They needed to find out who lived there and why Christopher had traveled that way. The door was opened by Jason Cochran, an overweight man who was surprised to see uniformed men in front of his house. His wife, Kelly, soon appeared. The officers informed the couple that they were investigating the disappearance of Christopher Regan, and a piece of paper found in his abandoned car pointed to this address. Kelly candidly revealed that she worked with Christopher at the same plant, and they got along well, and were even friends. She had not been in contact with him in recent weeks, but in mid-October, she tried to contact Chris via text messages. She received no response and assumed he had gone to North Carolina for a new job. Kelly also mentioned that Christopher had been having health issues and may have just decided to start a new life. Investigators found themselves in a quandary. They did not understand why the route that led to the Cochran home was written down on a piece of paper found in the missing man's car. Despite the lack of answers, the couple expressed their willingness to cooperate with the investigation. After a brief questioning, without getting the information they needed, the detectives left their home. The next phase of the investigation was a conversation with Christopher's co-workers. The detectives went to the factory where they interviewed workers and supervisors. One of the supervisors revealed that Christopher was having an affair with Kelly Cochran, and rumors had been circulating for months. This statement sparked interest, and investigators decided to re-interview the Cochran couple and clarify what was really going on in their relationship. In the end, Kelly admitted that she and Christopher did have an affair, but she was unable to disclose it the previous time because of her husband's presence. She and Jason, she said, have an open relationship, and Jason is generally okay with his wife's affairs on the side. However, the topic was sensitive and may have hurt his feelings. Christopher's co-workers, for their part, refuted Kelly's words. They stated that Jason was far from approving of the affair, and there was no loose relationship in the Cochran family, as Kelly claimed. Following Kelly into the police office was Jason himself. A conversation with him unequivocally revealed that he was adamantly opposed to his spouse's infidelity. This position made him a suspect. Nevertheless, the lack of conclusive evidence made it impossible to conclude that he was involved in Christopher's disappearance. The officers had no choice but to release Kelly and Jason from the police station. The investigation dragged on for 5 long months, and the mysterious mystery remained unsolved. On March 5, 2015, the case was placed in the hands of a new investigator who immediately began actively working on it. The first order of business, Hobart Police Department Detective Jeremy Ogden began a thorough analysis of the Cochran family's history. Kelly had met Jason while still in high school, and immediately after graduation, they began living together. The two were completely different in personality. Kelly was open, socially adept, and loved to talk. Jason was known for his reticence and taciturnity. He never started a conversation first, only answering questions asked of him. Despite these differences, the couple decided to get married. After the wedding, the couple started their own company, providing swimming pool maintenance services. The business was modest, but it brought them a decent income. Most of the pool maintenance work was taken on by Jason. The constant stress and strain took a toll on his health. The man began to have back problems, and every day he felt heavier and heavier. One day he realized that he was unable to continue the business. That's when Kelly took over all the work of running the business. It was a difficult period, but she trusted that her husband would soon recover and return to his duties. While his condition was getting worse day by day and the medical drugs were not bringing the desired relief, Kelly looked for all ways to help her husband recover. One day, she learned about a plant that offered hope for Jason's recovery. There was a chance, although its use in medical practice had only recently begun. It wasn't available everywhere, especially since it was banned in the state where they lived. For Kelly and Jason, the only way to get the drug was to move. They chose Michigan and moved to Iron River Township in 2014. Here, Jason was able to consult with a doctor and get a prescription for a miracle plant. Finally, his agony was going to be over. So, in early 2014, the plant, which specializes in manufacturing parts for U.S. warships, brought a new employee, 34-year-old Kelly Cochran, who had moved with her husband Jason to the area. Kelly made every effort to ensure her family's financial well-being, and the couple took a job at the same plant where Christopher Regan worked. Christopher and Kelly found common topics of conversation and over time became close friends. This companionship was of particular importance to Christopher, who had recently been having difficulties in his relationship with Terry. After reviewing all the evidence, the prosecutor made a strong case to a judge in Michigan to obtain a search warrant for the Cochrans' home. After successfully obtaining a ruling, the very next day, March 6th, the prosecutor sent a team of investigators to the couple's residence. The search of the Cochran house was conducted with special care, trying to find any traces indicating the possible involvement of Kelly and Jason in the disappearance of Christopher. However, all efforts were in vain. The only important find was a book, authored by Jason. He used a pseudonym from the world of video games. The title of the work caused a smile, but its content was horrifying. In this dark and violent book, Jason described murder scenes of everyone who had ever wronged him. The detectives read the book from cover to cover and noticed one of the characters that matched Christopher's characteristics exactly. Suspicions about Jason grew stronger. Perhaps he wasn't making up the crimes, but was inspired by real events he had committed. Given the heightened suspicions, it was decided 3 weeks later to conduct another search of the Cochran house. The investigation hoped to uncover evidence that might have been missed in the previous search. When police officers drove up to the Cochrans' home, they found that no cars were in sight and the yard and driveway were empty. Attempts to knock on the door were fruitless. No one opened the door. It turned out that immediately after the initial search, Kelly and Jason had left town and moved to another state, Indiana. Their quick getaway had investigators worried because they feared they might not be able to find the crucial evidence they had been hunting for months. It was especially important to collect DNA samples from the suspects. That's when Michigan police officers contacted their Indiana counterparts, asking them to take DNA samples instead. Ready to help, the Indiana police officers headed to the Cochrans' new home. The couple, for their part, did not object at all to the procedure, as there was no legitimate reason to charge them with murder. Nor was there any evidence of the victim's body itself. The investigation was gradually losing steam, leaving less and less chance of solving the disappearance of Christopher Regan. Time passed, and suddenly, on February 22, 2016, a call rang out at the police station in Hobart, Indiana. On the other end of the line was a worried Kelly Cochran. She tried to explain that her husband, Jason, was not breathing, but in her state of panic and emotional shock, it was difficult to provide specific details. Rescuers arrived on the scene where Kelly, in a state of utter panic, obstructed doctors. However, it soon became clear that Jason would no longer require assistance. He was sitting in a chair, his face burning with fire as if from extreme overheating. The doctors were forced to confirm his death. The body was sent for forensic examination. Kelly was handed over to a police patrol who took her to relatives who lived nearby, down the same street. Determined to find out the circumstances of what happened, investigators searched the Cochrans' new home. During the search, one of the officers discovered a syringe needle at the foot of the marital bed. After evaluating the condition of Jason's body, the investigator concluded that his death was caused by abuse of illegal substances. However, the forensic report came as a surprise to the detectives. Although Jason was found to have an excessive amount of illegal substances in his system, the forensic results pointed to something more shocking. Jason's death was caused by strangulation, as confirmed by bruises on his neck and face. Thus, Jason, the prime suspect in the kidnapping of Christopher Regan, was himself a victim of the crime. This discovery led to new questions and a re-examination of the evidence. Forensic experts immediately turned their attention to Kelly Cochran, who seemed to be the link between the two crimes. Now she was to become the prime suspect not only in Christopher's disappearance, but also in her husband's murder. This investigation became an even more complex puzzle. On February 23, 2016, Kelly Cochran was invited to the police station to testify in Jason's murder case. During the interrogation, the investigators asked her directly about her involvement in her husband's death and whether she had administered excessive doses of illegal drugs to him. Despite the lack of concrete evidence and pressure from the investigators, the young woman did not confess to either the murder of her husband or the kidnapping of Christopher. Several months later, investigators have not been able to find convincing evidence of Kelly's guilt, as well as the grounds for a possible arrest. During the course of the investigation, Detective Jeremy Ogden encountered Walter Hammerman, a close friend of Jason's, who, upon learning of the horrific incident from Kelly herself, immediately rushed to the police. Walter emphasized that illegal drugs could not be the cause of Jason's death, as he knew his friend well, and he would certainly tell him about any changes in his life. Moreover, Jason had been using only medicinal herbs with the sole purpose of getting rid of the back pain that had accompanied him for a long time. However, Walter noticed that his friend had been in a difficult situation lately. In March last year, Jason shared his worries with him, saying that he and Kelly had to travel to Indiana because of suspicions of the Iron River Police in their involvement in the disappearance of a man. Everything that had happened had greatly affected Jason. He had even become depressed and tried to take his own life, which required serious treatment. Walter also noted a distinct change in his friend's behavior. Kelly began to take more and more control over his life. It seemed that Jason was constantly on edge. Whereas before the boys could spend hours playing video games together, Jason now began to avoid parties as soon as his wife returned from work. This information became an important link in the investigation and allowed investigators to understand what was going on in the Cochran family. After the medical examiner determined that Jason had died from strangulation, Detective Ogden began to devise a cunning plan to force Kelly to tell the truth about the fate of Christopher Regan. It was decided to use Walter, Jason's close friend, as bait to lure Kelly into a trap and force her to make a mistake. Walter accepted a difficult role. He was to become a tool in the hands of the investigation and play out a performance in front of Kelly Cochran. On March 12, 2016, he called Kelly while under the watchful eye of police officers equipped with a listening device. He was to give Kelly a fictitious letter from Jason that supposedly contained something important. Walter also told Kelly that her husband had given the letter to her shortly before his death, with the condition that he not open the envelope and immediately send it to the police if anything happened to him. Suddenly, Kelly asked Walter to drop the idea. And this came as a real shock to both Walter and the police officers who had been monitoring the situation. However, despite this revelation, detectives still had no direct evidence. In the weeks that followed, Kelly was subjected to numerous interrogations by investigators in an attempt to get the truth out of her. But she continued to deny her guilt. On April 26, 2016, it suddenly became clear that Kelly Cochran had managed to slip away from the scrutiny of investigators. It was like a mockery of justice. Detectives immediately joined forces with police officers from Iron River and Hobart, announcing a federal manhunt for Kelly Cochran. Walter Hammerman, who cooperated with police, was shocked and frightened. He feared that the perpetrator would never be found and that she could once again get away with it and might later attempt to attack him. Kelly's phone was off, as if she was enjoying a game of cat and mouse with the cops. After 2 busy days full of anxiety and turmoil, Detective Jeremy Ogden managed to find out that Kelly Cochran was off the west coast of the United States. She had cleverly eluded the police and traveled to Kentucky, to the town of Wingo, located more than 6 hours away from Hobart. A detective contacted the local police, warning that upon discovering Kelly, they should arrest her, exercising extreme caution given her potential danger. On April 28th, police officers located Kelly at her cousin's home. The arrest team, responding quickly to the information, proceeded to the house. Knowing that Kelly could be dangerous and prone to escape attempts, they acted quickly and without warning. That afternoon, Kelly Cochran was apprehended and taken into custody. Detective Ogden arrived in Wingo, where he resumed interviews with the suspect along with investigators from Indiana and Michigan. After speaking with Kelly Cochran, everything became clear. The story of her relationship with Christopher Regan was much deeper and more serious than everyone thought. She felt true love for him. Kelly dreamed of leaving this cursed city and starting a new life with him. But everything changed on October 13th, 2015, when Jason found out about her cheating. They were fighting, and Jason remembered the pact the newlyweds made on their wedding night. According to that pact, the cheater was obligated to kill his lover if his cheating became known to his other half. Kelly claimed that she had never taken that agreement seriously. She thought it was a joke. But Jason was serious and warned her that he would do it himself if she didn't keep her vow. Kelly didn't want to take that responsibility, but she helped Jason commit this horrible crime. On the evening of October 14, 2015, Christopher Regan arrived at the home of his mistress, Kelly Cochran. It was a moment he wanted to enjoy their encounter while Kelly's husband was away. The young woman offered him dinner, then a pleasant time and intimacy. Everything was going according to plan. Their evening promised to be special. The lovers had dinner and, according to Kelly, went up to the second floor of the house. But their solitude was interrupted by Jason's sudden appearance. He burst into the bedroom with a rifle in his hands. Panicked and terrified, Christopher realized he was in a death trap. Jason, without hesitation, took aim and fired a shot at Christopher's head. The bullet mortally wounded him, and Chris died on the spot. Afterward, under Jason's direction, the accomplices dragged the body into the basement and began dismembering it using a hacksaw. Christopher's limbs and head were detached from the torso. The perpetrators placed the remains in several trash bags and then disposed of them by dumping them in the woods near the village of Crystal Falls. They drove Christopher's car away from the house to ward off suspicion. The couple thoroughly cleaned the house to remove evidence of the crime. The couple were accomplices to a terrible crime. Kelly Cochran also did not hide her participation in the tragic death of her husband. According to her, the idea of revenge was born when Jason, having discovered that Kelly had a lover, decided to commit the crime. Kelly, in turn, wanted to get back at him for the loss of happiness with the man she loved. She confessed that she was deeply in love with Christopher and felt that her spouse deprived her of the opportunity to be happy. She never could come to terms with the loss and the pain she felt on a daily basis. Kelly hated her husband for what he had forced her to do and realized she couldn't continue to live peacefully with it. The opportunity for a crime came on February 22, 2016, when Jason complained of back pain. Kelly talked him into giving him a shot with a medication. The dose of the medication was too high, but for some reason it didn't work properly. Seeing that her husband was still breathing, Kelly suffocated Jason by covering his mouth and nose with her hands. Later, just in case, Kelly squeezed his neck to make sure her husband was already dead. This explained the appearance of bruises on the victim's body. After Kelly Cochran's testimony, she actively cooperated with police to help determine where Christopher's remains were buried. On May 18, 2016, Detective Jeremy Ogden, along with a team of investigators and a canine team, went to a site near the village of Crystal Falls. This seldom visited neighborhood had become the hiding place of a terrible mystery. The team of investigators began a thorough sweep of the woods around the lake, each member carefully penetrating between the trees. One of the canine dogs suddenly detected a faint odor and led the officers forward. All the other officers followed the dog tensely, expecting the reveal to be close. The dog led the group to an unassuming hill littered with fallen leaves and branches. Clearing it, the investigators found objects. One of them was unmistakably a human skull. Upon closer examination, it was obvious that the victim had been murdered. The bullet hole spoke for itself. Investigators had no doubt that they had discovered Christopher's severed head. Also found at the scene was a .22 caliber bullet, a broken gun, and glasses that probably belonged to Regan. Dental records were used to identify the victim's remains. The missing person case that had plagued investigators for 2 years was finally solved. In April 2016, Kelly Cochran was formally charged with the murders of Christopher Regan and Jason Cochran. On February 13, 2017, the 34-year-old criminal was arraigned in Michigan State Court. The prosecutor emphasized that Kelly significantly diminishes her role by being the mastermind behind both crimes. He argued that Christopher viewed his relationship with Kelly as an occasional encounter, while she genuinely loved him and planned a future with him. Christopher's refusal to have a serious relationship with her led to rage, and Kelly decided to kill him by making up a story about a pact with her husband. The prosecution had strong evidence, including Kelly's confession. In court, however, she presented a different version. According to her, she was being abused by her jealous husband, who arranged the crime. He hid in the basement that day and caught the lovers off guard. Then he grabbed a gun in a rage and shot Christopher. The idea of dismembering the body was Jason's suggestion, and he coerced Kelly into helping by threatening to kill him. The new version made the jury wonder about Kelly's guilt. They deliberated for 3 hours and still reached their verdict. Kelly was found guilty of the premeditated murder of Christopher Regan. She was given a life sentence without parole. Jason Cochran's case did not go to trial, as a plea agreement was reached, and Kelly was sentenced to 65 years in prison. From the courtroom, Kelly Cochran was sent straight to Crown Point Correctional Facility in Ypsilanti, Michigan. There she is, serving her sentence, and only regrets that her personal life did not work out. In one phone interview, Kelly stated, "I tried to do what I thought was right. You go to school, you go to college, then you get married," Kelly Cochran shares in an interview. It was good in the beginning, but in the end, all my efforts were in vain. All I did was work all the time while my husband entertained himself with computer games. Within the prison walls, Kelly continues to reveal details of her crimes. She claims that she and Jason committed more crimes and Christopher is just one of their many victims. The details, names, and additional crimes Kelly does not disclose make it difficult to corroborate her words. Kelly's brother has also heard from her that there were more victims, but there is no concrete evidence to back that up at this time. Detective Jeremy Ogden of the Hobart, Indiana Police Department is scrutinizing the details, hoping to uncover some clues and find evidence of other possible crimes committed by Kelly and Jason Cochran, in hopes that this additional evidence will help close a chapter in this dark story. Thanks for watching, guys. That was Jack with you. Subscribe to the channel and don't forget to hit the bell so you don't miss new stories from around the world. See you soon. Take care.